Good evening. Welcome to the Village of Ossining meeting, Wednesday, June 11th. It is about I can't see it, 7:41. We're going to do the pledge and go into the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Let's see what we got here. I know it's a work session, but are there any announcements for any events or anything from the trustees? I'm seeing a no on that, so let's get started.
Everyone. For our first agenda item, we have Valerie Monastra here from Nelson Pope. Valerie is going to be reviewing the proposed zoning changes for the Riverfront Development District. And this is as advised by the comprehensive plan. And she also has another proposed zoning changes for cannabis dispensaries. And I think the village board may recall that while we initially allowed them where retail was allowed, we can't necessarily limit the number of dispensaries. We can, the board can restrict where the dispensaries can be. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Valerie.
Great, thank you. So we'll start with the Riverfront Development. Thought it was. Yeah, okay,
There we go.
all right. I was at a prior work session where we talked about trying to implement some of the comprehensive plan zoning changes. And one of them is specifically preserving areas west of the railroad from development while considering area-wide structural protective measures for these lands. And this specifically referred to the Riverfront Development District. And one of the, as part of the comprehensive plan process, some of the conversations came out as to looking at the uses within that, which we're calling the RDD, which is the Riverfront Development District, and think about limiting them based on the fact that these areas are more prone to flooding. And as climate change and sea level rise continue, they'll be even more prone to flooding in the future. So specifically, we're looking at potentially proposing to remove a residential use, which is a conditional use within the zoning district currently. Also educational uses from that zoning district. And when I refer to that zoning district, it really is more or less for property owners. There's the Engle Waterfront Park, which is owned by the town of Ossining, the oil tank property, Harbor Square, Westerly Marina, and Chatham Yacht Club. The just as an aside, Harbor Square is actually permitted under the PWRD, which is an overlay zone, which is planned residential waterfront development. So we're not necessarily proposing to remove that particular overlay because it really pertains to that property and no other properties within that area. So that development would still remain a conforming use, but what we're proposing is to remove residential use as a possibility within the Riverfront Development District for the other properties.
So what does that leave the other properties?
So that does leave the other properties with, and according to your current zoning, with animal related uses, which is like, for example, if you did veterinary, doggy daycares, those types of uses, bars, restaurants, recreation uses, office, restaurants, retail, clubhouses, infrastructure, water related uses.
It's infrastructure.
Infrastructure could be if for some reason there's any sort of public utilities, that type of use. And then also water related uses, artesian workshops and warehousing.
What about parking lots?
So right now, parking, like a parking lot specifically that would be rented or owned by another business is not permitted in that use. But if you want, while we're looking at uses, you could potentially add that to the use. If it's a public parking lot, that's not involved in the zoning, and government facilities are exempt from that. So you could have a public parking lot.
So if somebody wants to build a parking lot for tow trucks, can they do that now or not?
No,
Or buses or trucks or anything like that?
not within that district.
So the only thing, somebody wants to do tanks, oil tanks there, which exist now, they could.
No, so right now the oil tanks are technically a non-conforming use. So ultimately, once well, now that they're defunct, any new property owner that comes in would need to have a conforming use.
Okay. I'm just trying to see, so recreation, bar, restaurant.
Yeah, and we're also proposing to remove lodging or hotels as well, because these are a couple different, I mean, they're basically uses that you're gonna have larger populations within, a building and, in terms of like flooding and vulnerable areas and also the fact that a lot of these properties themselves, like if you recall, Harbor Square actually did regrading to raise its overall elevation. These would all need to do similar, and a number of them are actually built on, property different than Harbor Square. So like on piers and stuff like that. So we're recommending maybe removing those particular uses for those reasons.
Okay. Anybody have questions?
So in the current zoning, warehouse and freight movement is currently conditional.
Yes.
That to me feels like one that might be difficult to, like if we're really concerned about the impact of water, and we're really concerned about the impact of, that.
Right.
To me, that seems like one where, storing a whole bunch of stuff down there, or to your point, shuttle stop for buses or transportation or, freight trucks like that,
Right.
conditional still means that it needs it has to be permitted, correct? Like it has to go through the planning process.
Right.
So it's not as of right, is basically.
Right, that's correct.
That would be one, that would be the only other one, like when I was looking through the table that I think I would consider given the intent of the comprehensive plan, which
Right.
was to limit potential risk to buildings in ways that, the impact of the rising water
Yeah.
and, the river and stuff like that, that would be the other one
Okay.
for me that feels appropriate to consider.
But you're saying, I'm sorry, you're saying.
Got it. Yeah. You're saying you don't think warehousing should be a use either?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if somebody wants to store stuff down there, they're taking a chance
Yeah, I was,
on what happens to it. It's their problem. I mean, it's not like it's a daycare center, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I just feel like that is something that actually a business down there might want to do. But I personally think that warehousing's okay. Feeling.
we could have it as a potentially an accessory, just to make sure that it can be used as an accessory use. So for some of the marinas and stuff like that, we can have that as an accessory use as opposed to a standalone prime principal use.
Yeah. I think, yep. And I think the other concern for me relative to like warehousing down by the waterfront is the traffic.
You're saying somebody might want to build a warehouse down there?
Yeah.
All right. I was thinking of existing buildings. What if an existing building wanted to become a warehouse?
So, well, technically, it would be allowed within the zoning at this point.
It would,
Yes.
but if we pass this,
It would be
It would
then,
not.
right, so if somebody wanted to have a standalone warehouse, they wouldn't be allowed. What I would suggest doing is, and I'll look at the zoning, is maybe make sure that it's clear that like warehousing that's an accessory use to something like a marina or another business would be permitted.
okay.
So that, it's not, so they can store stuff on site.
That
or-
makes sense.
Right,
Yeah, I don't think someone coming and building a new warehouse makes a lot of sense, but I just think that their existing business has structures that would be perfect for warehousing. If they don't already use them for that, I don't know. So I think they ought to be able to do that if they want to. If they own those buildings and you can't do much else with them,
right.
I mean, those buildings down there used to be factories, that certainly is gone. Um, so it becomes a more and more limited. And because of we can't stop the water from rising, obviously. But, I mean, I don't want to prevent someone who owns structures down there from being able to use them to store stuff.
Right.
Well, no, I mean, there used to be a Rand McNally printing factory down there and all those buildings, you know what I mean? And they used to make all sorts of things in the big stone, in the big brick warehouse that we all love so much, in the big brick factory building. There got to be uses, there got to be uses for these structures that they can use them for. Got to be something. If they want to put boats in there, or, you know, if they want to put, they should be able to put what they want in there, as long as it's not, you know, an environmental problem. As long as it's not something that if water hits it, it becomes a, you know.
Right, if it's tied to the marina, then it would be accessory. It would be,
Okay.
I mean, I think if somebody were to do like, not that it's gonna be like an Amazon warehouse, right? You know, that's not gonna happen because they like much bigger spaces, but that's an example of just a standalone warehouse.
Yeah, and I was thinking much more along the lines of a standalone business as opposed to accessory
Right.
use, right?
Like those warehouse containing to.
Yeah, because light industrial is not permitted down there anyway, so I was considering it, you know, similar to that as a standalone business. So,
Okay,
but
so do they meet halfway somewhere with everybody? I don't think the deputy mayor and I have any input.
no, like to me, the accessory, making sure it's permitted as as an accessory use makes sense.
Okay.
Oh, the more, I mean, if you, I mean, this is, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to give a little bit of added context for folks who are not following along as closely. The board is in the process of passing a moratorium for 2 zoning districts in the village, and this would encompass, I believe, the entirety of the changes for one of those 2 districts.
Right.
So depending on what the board, wishes to do, for the other one, if anything, the moratorium might be short and sweet.
Right.
Next.
All right, next. So the next topic I'm here to talk to the board about tonight is cannabis. So again, this is the beginning discussion for this particular topic, mostly because there's a lot of decisions to make, and so it's going to be like in 2 phases. So I think we've discussed the cannabis retail use with this board a number of times over the years. And I think the board has always taken the position of if it's retail, it'll operate under the retail use and whatever zoning districts are allowed for retail. We currently have 2 cannabis dispensaries that will be coming into the village.
I thought there were 3.
So there's 2 that have been approved at the planning board.
Oh, the third hasn't yet.
Ones that have started their
Oh, okay.
licensing
Oh, okay.
process
All
for
right.
other potential other sites.
So they've been approved to go ahead and get going. Yeah, because they're working on the spaces.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So there's, the one is going to be located at 2623 Main Street in the Station Plaza North zoning district down by the train station area. And then the other one is 50 North Highland Avenue in the Neighborhood Center District, which is where the old yeah, thank you. Opening very.
Yeah, I saw that they've done a lot of work on it.
So what we have had other inquiries about potentially opening up additional cannabis retail. And so we wanted to just kind of revisit this conversation again to see if the board is interested in maybe creating a cannabis as its own zoning use definition within the zoning chapter, and then restricting it to certain zoning districts. Because right now you have a total of, I think, like 13 zoning districts that allow for retail. And I provided you a zoning map where you can see where the different zoning districts are, which there is a large part of the village that would allow for basically cannabis dispensaries. So we wanted to kind of have this conversation to see if the village board would be interested in maybe restricting certain zoning districts from cannabis dispensary. And if so, that would be like the first conversation. And then the second conversation, we'd come back at a future work session to talk about what that would look like in terms of regulations for those particular zoning districts where we would allow the cannabis.
Thank you. My initial question is, there are already regulations that limit how close to a church or a house of worship, a school, et cetera, et cetera. And when you map out across the village where a dispensary can go, this is going back to our original conversation a while back, but it was relatively limited. Can you comment on how those limits overlay with these limits?
Sure, because I think when we had that conversation, when that conversation took place at the village board, that was when I think community centers were also part of that mix. They have now since dropped those from the consideration. So really, at this point in time, it's from churches and schools, and then they've since defined that distance much more, I'm gonna say the restrictions are more narrow at this point, in terms of the way they've defined them. And Stuart, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
But we've defined them, right? So if we say like 1,000 feet,
No, the
No, we
state
didn't.
has. So and when I say define them, like they've still kept the distance, like the 500-foot distance,
Uh-huh.
but now it's like, it's how they measure it becomes much more like from door to door, so then all of a
Are
sudden.
they
it's-
doing that for bars too, or just cannabis? No?
Their own
Yeah.
restrictions with regard to, the measuring system is the same because it's all essentially under the state liquor authority.
Right.
But they made it more restrictive. But just back to the deputy mayor, this board has never passed its own. This board had made a determination not to do that.
Mm.
So the only distance restrictions that exist are the ones that are currently under the Cannabis Control Act.
Well, from what I can tell, the dispensaries that have opened have done so because there have been retail spaces available. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you then further restrict where they can go, then if there are no retail spaces available, it becomes extremely restrictive. I personally am not really for additional restrictions. I'm just gonna say it right now.
If I might just add, I'm sorry, another reason for this is not, proximity to other things so much as saturation. We are 3 square miles, and I know that we've had, in addition to the 2 that are already moving forward, probably
more.
2 locations, but probably a total of 6 additional inquiries under different licenses for some of those same locations. So I think that was sort of more the thrust of this conversation is at what point, is it healthy for the village and these businesses to be duplicated, in such wide numbers?
So my question is, is there a limit that you would propose that would limit the number of?
You can't limit the number.
Right. So I guess that's my question. So we say, okay, we're going to limit it to the OR, to the IR, and to the S100, and you can only have them there. But if there's 10 retail businesses there, then it doesn't really matter because it doesn't, yeah.
So, I mean, I think it really comes down to whether this board feels comfortable, like, for example, are you comfortable having one along Main Street? Or would you prefer to have them along Route 9 or which, so that's where some of that those conversations, can take place. If you're really open for, whatever zoning districts within the village, then, we can just continue as we have been proceeding.
And the process remains that if a dispensary wants to open in the village, they come to the board to get not approval, but they make their case and then the state asks, hey, what do you think? And then so far we've said, yeah, it's fine. But we could say, no, it's not fine. And then they would take that into consideration conceivably when making a determination.
You'd have to explain
Why?
also.
Yeah.
And explaining that, well, we have too many, I don't think is one of the explanations, right?
Could it not be?
Not really clear how those letters are used.
Right.
In judging from our own experience and speaking to our peer municipalities, some boards have said, hey, we really like, this thing, and then it doesn't get the license to go forward. Some boards have said, oh, we have some concerns, about the location and some of these things, and the license has been granted. So
Yeah.
it's not really clear, how those letters are being used at the state level.
So just in plain English, since we last saw the maps, that we said, we'll go with whatever the state does because it's pretty limited. Is there now more square area to open these?
Yes,
Okay.
and I mean, we can regenerate a map if that
Mhm.
would be helpful to this board. And we can, present that. It won't take long, and I think we have a better sense of, how the measurements, because I think the first time there wasn't real clear in terms of, at that point in time, there wasn't real clear whether it was going to be a radius versus now it seems like door to door. So we can take a look at that and then provide you some additional information on that if you'd like.
So I think the way the state law reads specifically is that it's, and I'm on the Albany, the page right now. It says, under New York state law, no cannabis dispensary shall be located on the same road and within 200 feet of the entrance to a house of worship or 500 feet from the entrance to a school.
Right.
So I think back when it was originally being discussed, the same street limitation was, was not there. Yeah, exactly. That
That
wasn't
new?
part of it. And I
So the
believe the
big-
distances,
That same street?
Yeah, that would only work if it said or, because
Right.
it says and.
And or.
yeah, so it
No,
has to
that's-
be,
Yeah, it's not
yeah.
and or, it's and. If
And-
it said
and-
or, then,
and
that
it's
would
not
be
from the
correct.
property, it's from the entrance.
Right.
right.
It's similar to the liquor authority.
Mhm.
It's really,
And then
the same.
the only other distance restriction I see is that a minimum of 1,000 feet away from another dispensary. So I mean, 300 yards, it's not that much.
And I'm sorry, when we had looked at this initially, not just a community center was a consideration, but I think it was, you might recall better what the language was, but anything that was governed by the State Department of Education. So that was any childcare center, of which we have several dozen. So now that those are not a consideration and it's really only like elementary, middle, high school, it's definitely expanded the available retail areas.
Than what we first looked at.
Correct.
Okay, so I think it would help to have a map,
Sure.
because that
Yeah.
was one of our decisioning.
Okay.
I don't think it's the numbers, like, what do I, think there should be fewer barbershops or more barbershop? One would think that business practices would say if you have one too many of something, the last person in is going out of business, or the first person in, because now the competition is too saturated. But this is a little different, because the conversation, take away on a bell curve, the two 10% on either side of people who just didn't want cannabis. So it wasn't how many and all that. Take the people in the middle and say, "Oh, I'm okay, but it can't be near a community center. That footage, you could put it right near the community center. And there's a lot of kids and, it's like, I wouldn't put a bar there either, but it's not whether I would or not. It's like whether, we should allow more and more and more of these. Also, when we were voting on this, there was a sense that more communities would opt in. And in fact, that's not what happened. Communities said they were gonna opt in, then didn't opt in. On one hand, I'm like, capitalism at its best. If you could open 20 dispensaries, if you want to spend your money to open the 20th, good luck to you, because I don't know how you're gonna make your $1 million a month that you're supposed to make on it. On the other hand, we have some responsibility to constituents who legitimately said, like, I wouldn't do that with bars. I don't want 14, Taco Bells. I don't, how many more gas stations do you want? I mean, we have to weigh. And because it's changed, I think it's fair that you're bringing it up to us and saying, okay, the ground shifted on you a little bit. It's now different. And maybe in 6 months, a year will be different again, right? Because this is a new product on the marketplace. In the marketplace. So, yeah, I'd like to see the map and sort of sit there and, sort of weigh some of these issues and see where we are with them. And I don't know about the retail space, because today there's X number and tomorrow some will go move to Croton and others will stay here and people from Croton will move here. Retail space is a revolving door. That bakery was here for many years and then it wasn't, right? This could be a better business than what it was before. I don't know. What do I know, right? So none of us do. So I don't know. It's hard to tell about retail space. Many things have moved out and other things are moving in. So it's to me, it's never a question whether there's enough retail space or not enough retail. It really is about the kind of businesses. And I think because it's cannabis and because it's new. You know, there is a way to look at it. I mean, I just came back from Colorado where they've had this for many years. They really generally, the only place that's overcrowded, we've seen multiple, is off exits to highways. Which is very creepy to me, because you think of them on and off. With the affluent communities, they're also going to approve it. It's a similar sort of gambit. That said, it's a little weird that people are driving and smoking because they can't stay in the retail store. But who am I to judge?
You're
What do
taking
I
it.
know? Of course they are. So, I don't know, right? What do I know? What do any of us know? We're doing the best we can, but because it's shifted, I think we should look at a map and say, oh, this is sort of uncomfortable. And we do still have the opportunity with the zoning to make adjustments, which is, I think, what's really being discussed here is adjustments.
Right,
Or choose not to change anything.
Yeah.
Leave it the way it is. Right? I mean, that's what we're being asked.
absolutely.
Okay,
Okay, all
so
right.
let's do that. It's one of these helps me because I don't visualize. I can find my own house. over there.
Now, why, well, I just, yeah,
Yeah,
it was
we-
really, I mean, it was more or less for you to understand that there's a large
You don't
area
have to
within the
explain.
village.
I
that-
publicly
oh,
said that I can't read, so that's me. Other people can. I'm not very, I'm visual, but not this way. So I'll need something a little bit more one-on-one.
okay, sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Valerie. Our next agenda item is Stuart's going to take us through a special permit review for T-Mobile at 56 Browning Drive.
Thank you, Village Manager. Good evening, folks. David Kenny from the office of Snyder and Snyder is here. This is a renewal of a special permit that the village has granted every 5 years with regard to T-Mobile, with regard to their facilities at 56 Browning Drive. The 5 years, we're in the window for the 5 years. Basically, the way it works is within 6 to 12 months before the expiration, which would be in February of 26. They come here with an application, as they have done, as I said, for the past number of years and times. They are here now. All the reporting has been provided to the board. It is essentially the same location as it has been in the past. And this is just to renew for another 5 years the current special use permit.
Okay.
That was perfectly stated. For the record, my name is
This is-
David Kenny from Snyder and Snyder, here tonight to answer any questions you may have.
I don't know what to ask, to be honest with you. I find this.
Pretty benign project. We're just keeping what is existing.
And just so the board is aware, this year we will receive from T-Mobile $57,383 in rent.
Less than the previous year or
No, that goes up every year.
every year.
Yes. And we also get from the other two companies that are
Oh, it's
on the
different,
tower.
that's right.
But 57,383 this year. And it's just a renewal, and then it would be a resolution to the board next week to extend it, and it would then go from February 26 to February of 31.
Do we have any complaints from constituents or anybody in the community?
No.
about Any of this?
None. We have received nothing.
I think the only question I have is, over time, I would hope that there are improvements in like cell phone coverage and service, and if there are new technologies, does this allow for
Well,
improvements from that
one, it does. In
perspective?
fact, in 2021, there were revisions to the antennas that
Yep.
were put up there, and there was work that was done. We do on occasion get not only from T-Mobile, but from Verizon and from AT&T New Singular applications to revise with the work that they are doing there, which is essentially to upgrade it. And they do that, we get those things in, they get reviewed and they get taken care of. So the answer to that is yes, that's something that I know T-Mobile looks at and I know that the other carriers look at as well, to basically do as much as they can off of this one particular location that is village owned. There are other antennas throughout the village in non-village owned locations, but this is the one that is village owned. And this particular permit is coming up now for its renewal.
So for example, I actually have a pending application with the village. We're upgrading, T-Mobile's upgrading the sites at 117 South Highland. So we're working on that now. As Stuart just stated, back in 2021, there was upgrades to the antennas. We also installed a generator at the site to help improve in case of a power outage. You'd still have the site still working. So absolutely, T-Mobile's always constantly trying to upgrade their sites.
Yeah. And for me, that's important because, I would want our community to make sure we've got, especially, in the event of storms or something like that, the access to viable
Absolutely.
cellular communications. That's kind of why I'm asking that.
That seems to when people most use their phones is when the power goes out and you need an emergency call. So it's good to have the backup power supply. And yeah, absolutely. That's also how I stay employed, is I make sure I'm upgrading all of the sites.
Okay.
Just-
Somebody else has questions? That's pretty
Just
cool.
reminds me of my mother-in-law who, when there was a power outage, said to my wife, listen, I'll get right back to you. Just let me plug the phone into the wall. And my wife said the wall that has no power coming through it. And we didn't speak to my mother-in-law for a few days, but okay,
We have an idea.
is what it is. Thank you, David. We'll have a resolution for the board next week.
That's fine. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your time.
David, thanks a lot.
Thank you, David. So the next agenda item, the owners of 197 Main Street,
95.
195, I'm sorry, I'm
That's
reading it
okay.
and I'm reading wrong. 195 Main Street, we had, if the board remembers, we had a license agreement to create a loading zone in the back of the building. This is a building that has some retail as well as some apartments, mixed-use building on the upper crescent of Main Street. The license was specific to allow for loading for the retail establishments and for carting pickup. And this is part of our evolution from going from village pickup to private carting in that area, which we did to clean up the area. Subsequently, the owners have striped and reserved parking spaces in that area. But that was not a use that was intended when the license agreement was formed. So the owners are asking for an amendment or revision to that license to include the dedicated parking for their business and their building.
Thank you. Thank you, Village Manager. Just one thing, Jamie, I believe that Mayor Vesio is in the list, so if he could be brought over.
Absolutely, he has his hand up. One moment.
Thanks.
I'm just gonna add a word.
Mayor Vesio, if I bring you over, can you please turn on your camera and unmute, please?
I just want to be clear in the wording is correct. It was striped without permission from the village.
It was striped without knowledge or permission of the village.
Okay.
And the spaces are marked as reserved specifically for the business. And I believe there's 5 spaces that are striped.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Vesio, I know you were introduced as Mayor Vesio, you're mayor in Barcliff, but you're here not in regards to that, but as an individual owner of that building. So if you want to sort of explain to us what the scenario is and why we should approve this?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Board of Trustees.
What it is that you're requesting?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor and Board of Trustees. Steve Vesio on behalf of SMRR, the landlord at 195 Main Street. As you're aware, the landlord and the village are in a license agreement, which was revised once to add the refuse area, the loading dock that's built next to the property. Back behind there, the property lines have kind of a weird diagonal line. And the structures that were built and approved in the early 70s with a CO don't take those property lines into regard. They more or less line up with the buildings, so that the loading dock is not a weird, unequal distance. It's consistent throughout. So that straddles the property line. Given that snow plowing and the maintenance needed to be done on that, we recognized that it was a bit of a challenge for the village to do it. We offered to do some of that work, including installing railing, take care of the snow plow, clean up the trash that tends to blow around there, and generally improve the loading area. The village entered into a license agreement to allow us to do that for loading and loading, and among other things, which is what the license agreement states. The second license agreement amendment was for the refuse area. Prior to the refuse area amendment, we did submit to Mr. Kahan a striping plan for the spaces in the back. So the village definitely was aware that we did the striping work. And
When did you do that?
2022,
No, for the
maybe,
striping, when did you do that?
maybe 2021, 2022, somewhere around there. It's been a
Okay.
while. So we did the striping. We striped out 2 loading zones because not only our building uses that, but 2 adjacent buildings further up, including the pharmacy and the Keenan building, use that area for loading and unloading. One side of the dock has a high dock for larger trucks. The other side has a lower dock for like vans. So we kept one side open, and then we striped out 4 spaces that say reserved, S1, S2, N1, and N2, South 1, South, and North 2. And what we had allocated those to is to the business owners. The food service comes in and out. Sometimes they do park there for an extended period, but they are in and out a lot. Beauty supply, same thing. We're not renting those out for any profit at all. There's no overnight parking. It's only parking during business hours for the owners. And like I said, they are going in and out. Sometimes they are there for a longer period of time. But it's been working out pretty well because we've been able to keep the area nice and neat, clean, free of refuse. Been able to make sure that the trash truck has access, and that's, so we're kind of just asking to formalize what we've been doing down there. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, it's a little bit different than what's described, and you guys sent somebody to look at this, right?
We did look at it. It was not clear to anyone on village staff what the spaces were being used for. They were only marked as reserved. So this is new information for me as well.
Okay. And you said there were 5, and he's saying there's 4.
I might have missed look at it, but
Okay, so
there's,
still look
yeah.
at it.
Well, I have a photo. I thought there were 5. There might very well be 4. I'm not going to argue with
Okay.
Mr. Vesio.
Okay, and we don't actually know who's using it because I was told that, do we know that people are parking overnight or not parking overnight?
I know that this came to light because our parking enforcement officer went to enforce, and because it's again, my understanding is that vehicle parking was not part of the original license agreements, that there was a question on how to enforce parking there, because technically there shouldn't be vehicle parking back there. That was the original discussion with most of the parking, with most of the owners, because the vehicles, sometimes, depending on where they're parked, impede with the ability to have the carting service, and the loading and unloading. So we don't have a lot of information on what's being done there, and I don't know at what time. I would assume if a ticket was given by an enforcement or attempted to be given, it was during the day.
Did
It
you
wouldn't
wanna
have been
say
overnight.
To say we haven't issued a ticket because there is technically no provision in the code for parking on village property in an unmarked space. What is clear is that it's village property. What is clear is that cars are being parked. Parking Officer D'Angelo has regularly seen up to 5 cars parked there, and he's seen the same cars there because I have multiple emails from him. But it was not ticketed because we had no section of the code we could refer to when we would be issuing a ticket.
Okay, is there any other information that we need?
No, it's just this, again, it's
You got it?
it's village
So
property.
Let me see if I get this timeline also correct. We weren't in the village, this is village property. No one in the village was notified. Somebody went out and arbitrarily and randomly decided to take spray paint and create boxes for cars and on our property. And whoever rents it is sort of unclear, except that it's the same cars being witnessed on a regular basis. could be anybody's, could be shop owners, could be neighbors, it could be tenants, we don't really know. As a courtesy, nobody towed those cars, nobody ticketed them, because it doesn't say no parking, but that doesn't mean parking is allowed, because somebody decided to randomly put stripes there. We clearly have a licensing agreement, so the timing is important, because we weren't notified that this was done, it was just done. And now, after the fact, we're being asked to amend the licensing agreement, which states that it's only for loading and unloading and carting, I guess, is part of that. Is that correct?
The
Do I have
license,
the
yes,
timing
you
correct?
have it
Okay.
correct. And the revised license agreement that Mr. Vesio presented to me a couple of months back, that is essentially a new survey with meets and bounds. The other survey was not really a meets and bounds. And this survey does, and it was one of the documents provided to you folks, does specifically delineate those areas as parking, plus the green crosshatched areas, which would be the loading and unloading areas. And that was, again, we did not know, or let me say it this way, I did not know that vehicles were parking there until I was advised by parking officer D'Angelo.
Because they didn't know if they should ticket or what the deal.
Exactly correct.
Oh. Okay, so let's just pause here and see if anybody has comments or questions on this.
I'll start. Mr. Vesio, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. First, I want to create the space for you to respond to anything that you've heard so far.
Yes, thank you for that. We did not, I assure you, just go stripe village property. That is not something that we would do. I fully understand municipal property rights, and I understand the rights and obligations of a license agreement. Prior to striping, we sent an email to Village Council advising of our striping plans. It showed 2 yellow lanes that said loading, no parking. It showed 4 white parking spaces that said reserved N1, reserved N2, reserved S1, reserved S2. Those were clearly to be used as parking spaces the way that they were shown. We were told the striping was okay to proceed with, and we went and then spent money to have a professional striping company come and do this work. And it's done to the highest standard. They're probably the same company that do the streets in the village.
Thank you. And do you did you get a response to that email in 2021, 22?
They said no objection.
Interesting. Okay, so would you be able to forward those emails to us?
I'm sure I could dig them up. I think Mr. Kahan might have them though.
Do you have them?
I don't.
Okay.
Okay, so that's something we can sort out. We'll be able to find that. That would be helpful to see.
Okay.
Second is if you can say a little bit about the use has changed from the original agreement, and as I understand it, it's been a number of years now that it's been the case. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been over the course of the last few years?
Sure. So we've been maintaining the village's property in good condition. I think, very good condition. We've been keeping the trash out of there. We've been making sure it's safe for people to traverse the public property. We plow the snow. We've installed, like I said, a railing, which costs several $1,000s. And we take on the liability of the public traversing there. So, I mean, in February of this year, I think we spent nearly $2,000 just plowing snow. So, it was always our intention to have the business owners delivering food or whatever else not be in the loading zone and be in these spaces, whether it be for, a few minutes or an hour or a few hours, just as they saw fit. It would allow us to control that space. And like I said, make sure that the carting companies can get to the refuse containers so that they don't overflow and cause pest problems. But, without the right of us being able to utilize those spaces for the store owners and really control it, we're really not getting much more rights than the average public. Yet we're having to expend significant funds and take on insurance liability. It's kind of a give and take, that's
Yep.
the way I see it. It's kind of been a give and take.
Yep, I hear what you're saying. That's it for me for now. I'll hand it to my colleague. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions?
My question is, would this set some sort of precedent where other businesses could go, we want a license agreement to have our own parking spaces?
Right. I mean, you're not asking him, so
Yeah.
I guess first of all, I understand the aspect of we're taking care of something in order for something else, but I remember this conversation. And I remember very clearly that it was about karting. I remember very clearly that it was a mess back there. And the mess, part of the mess was that the owners of the properties were not taking care of the properties. So taking care of the properties is good for everybody. It isn't something anybody's doing for the village. It's something that should have been done and is the responsibility actually of the owners of the properties to maintain the cleanliness, the safety, etc. And so deals were cut and licenses were done so that people do benefit. There's a difference though between the license that was done that did not include parking. So we'll wait to see if Stuart Gahan finds this letter. Everything's done on email. So if it's in there, he generally keeps pretty good tabs of his emails. So we'll see if this slipped through and we can look at that. I don't think the attorney actually can do that without the board, the agreement, but that's a different conversation. We can deal with at a later time. I just want to make sure that everybody being in and all this money, landlords collect rent. This is a cost of doing business. While we appreciate that the businesses are keeping the back clean and put the railing, it should be pointed out for the public record that for years, the village was doing it when they shouldn't have been in the first place. It has always been the responsibility of the businesses. It's sort of like we get back what should have been given to us in the first place. So I just want to, this is all going on public record. And I may have overstepped in saying, oh, somebody purposely did something wrong. I don't think anybody did anything purposely wrong, but I do think that somebody painting lines without informing the village. So now we're just going to look for the email because maybe he did inform and then that's a different issue. Like somebody was informed, didn't follow up, whatever, we'll deal with it as it comes up. And since it's the businesses and the employees, there are plenty of other places to park. We have an issue that I think Trustee White is bringing up, which is not about the legality of all this, but in setting precedent, because it's really difficult for us to tell residents and businesses that they can stripe something for their folks for parking, whether it's the people renting there or the people working there, whereas other places aren't allowed to do that. And they have to park like everybody else, where there is parking 10 yards away. You know, I hear about all of this parking behind the stores, but when I'm there, it's a 10-yard walk to the parking area. This is not a big walk. It's between being 10 feet or 10 yards. And we always approved it based on the karting, because when you have a business, would we rather have some truck in front on Main Street blocking up traffic for 45 minutes? Of course not. We should make it easier for trucks to load and unload for businesses. Today, it's one kind of business. Tomorrow, maybe a different business, but all businesses need loading docks and zones and an ease so they don't knock into other cars. And that was the whole conversation, was about that. And so I just want to go for the public record. I don't remember the year. I just know I was in this seat over there. Oh, I was over there. You have a question. So this is a publicly, and we can also go back to the conversation about the whole karting thing to make sure, because we do have the record of the actual licensing.
All right. So just a couple of questions on the conversation, Mr. Vesio. Did you own the building? You're talking on behalf of the LLC, of which I'm assuming you're a primary member of the LLC that owns the building?
Yes, I'm representing SMRR tonight. SMRR LLC is the owner of the property.
Got it. And are you a board member of that
Yeah,
LLC?
yes, I'm a member of the LLC.
Okay, so I just want to make sure you're not acting as a third party attorney relative to that, but you are actually acting as a board member of the LLC. So
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. Does the LLC carry liability insurance on the business?
We carry property insurance. It has general liability as a component. So it's not necessarily on a business, it's on the entity that owns the property.
Okay.
If that answers your
I'm just
question.
trying to
Yeah,
understand.
we have insurance, and we have an insurance certificate naming the village for our operations in the license area as well.
Right. So in the absence of a license agreement, you would still need to carry liability insurance for the building.
Yes, we just wouldn't cover actions covering on public land.
Okay.
Like we do now.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
understand the, the different,
The
the
incremental.
incremental piece here, right? Because it was presented as if you were carrying it only for the village, and that's not necessarily the case. It's an incremental to existing liability.
Well, you have to have it regardless if you have a mortgage. What I mentioned was that we have additional exposure because if somebody trips and falls on village land, they'll sue us.
Yep, understand. And so, and I read through the agreement and said that. So, the initial agreement was for, the uses that were noted. Was primarily, as a loading zone, right? I mean, that was the specific use. There was, that was mentioned in the original agreement. Do the existing parking spaces limit access to the loading facility at all? At all?
Access. Is there spaces striped out in front of where the loading dock is? Is that your question?
No, I'm asking, do the parking spaces limit access to the loading dock at all? Like the
No, the
size of
loading dock
truck
is,
the size of the truck that could get in there, the turn, it doesn't impact the size of the truck that can back up to it at all.
no, when we laid this out, we consulted with the striping company to ensure that there would always be a sufficient turning radius for all the trucks going in there. And that's why the two loading zones, the lanes, are striped in yellow as opposed to white.
Okay, I need to go take a look at it, right? That's,
Sure.
and so from that perspective, but I think for me, the biggest thing is the fundamental change in the usage, right? The usage in the initial agreement was dictated as a loading zone, right? From that perspective. And I think the other part is, and I agree with the precedent kind of component of this, because there was a presumption of, in the, we'll see what documentation comes up, right? But we'll have to see. I'll reserve until I see the
Yeah.
documentation,
I mean,
right?
I
But
think
if
we're
there's a
missing-
presumption of,
Yeah, I think we're missing a couple of pieces.
Yeah.
So, Stuart, if you can look through 2021 emails, I guess.
The dumpster program was initiated in 2023.
Yeah.
So if there's an agreement that proceeded when Mr. Vesio actually took occupancy of the building,
It actually doesn't
but the
matter.
dumpster program, the dumpster program and the license specific for the dumpster program, up until 2023, the village was still picking up the garbage there. So,
So any discussion before that really is sort of moot point. It really matters whether an email was sent and somehow information was sent in 2023 forwards, because any conversation regarding anything beforehand is not real information because everything changed after that. Is that what you're saying? Am I understanding what your commentary is?
that is my belief,
Okay.
because we wouldn't have had a license agreement specific to dumpster pickup in this regard, because we were the ones actually picking up the garbage. So,
Right.
I don't know if there was a loading zone agreement though, which may have preceded that, because a loading zone would have probably, and I'm just not sure. if
There
the loading
was,
zone
the original agreement was 2021. There was a revision in 2023, which added the area with the dumpsters.
Okay, so the loading zone agreement would have been 2021. The
Correct.
dumpster agreement was 2023.
Okay.
Well, when you, I
So
just
we're-
want to be clear, what was in 2023 was a letter revision to the 2021 agreement, simply increasing the area under the license agreement to include the dumpster area. That's what it did. It didn't, there's no other change to the 2021 agreement.
Got it. But none of it included parking spaces.
No, I will look for whatever email.
Well,
So
it's also, I think, Mr. Vesio's responsibility. He says he sent the letter. He should also find it. And even once we have it. So it seems like we can't really make a decision tonight. We will have to make a decision about whether we want to amend and how it's actually being used, et cetera. And, that's as far as we can go without something to look at. I don't know what the appetite, if this letter isn't found, what the appetite is to allow for any type of parking because we have moved away from creating parking spaces because we have other people with businesses who would like to create parking spaces. And many of them also have tenants on the second floor, third. It's impossible for this village to sit here and figure out whether they're tenants or business people. It's not a realistic expectation of the village to figure it out. So it's a little bit complicated based on what you said, Trustee White, that we've discussed. All of this, by the way, was discussed in detail. I remember this conversation about being very specific about the use. And we have had many people in here wanting to create parking spaces that we say over and over again, we cannot keep adding non-existing parking spaces that people create parking spaces. In back of storerooms and houses on village property. So let's see where we are once we get some more information that both of you can do. Until then, we're just going to table it till we are able to look at this. I don't know what the time frame is to find an email, but let's give everybody time to do it. And that's it. I also hear that other stores are using that space, from what Mr. Vesio says. That's also news to me, that they're using that space. Is that what you said, or did I misunderstand?
No, I didn't say that any other stores were using it.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
just
no.
stores, just the store that rents from you in the building.
Yep.
Those are
Yep.
the only, not the tenants, just the stores.
Yeah, I can't say what happens at night when I'm not there, but there should be nobody parking there after business hours is the way that it has been set up.
Oh, is that what
and-
it says on some
Well,
sign?
no, that's
No, I
what
guess I'll go
that's what I've
look at it.
expressed.
I think
That's what I've
Pat Yost is
expressed.
right. I'll go look at it and see what the signs say for people, and if there are any signs.
Or
It's no
just like
signs.
thing at night, and we can get reports on that, but right now,
Okay. All right.
Can I just briefly go
Yeah.
over the timeline just to make sure, because I know there's a lot of changes over the years and it was kind of like mid-COVID too, so everybody was remote. So we got the license agreement in 2021 to create the loading zones and do repairs. And we also added a rail. These are all on village property.
Right, like
and-
everybody else, right?
Right, and we submitted an email to the village council to get those improvements approved, and that was the standard procedure. We came
Okay.
back in 2023 just to add an area for the refuse because we were told that the village was discontinuing its refuse program for
Correct.
the commercial tenants and also for the apartments because they were renters. So we needed an area to put a refuse container. An area was added, and that was the revision. Just to be clear of the steps.
But you also said that you sent something to our attorney about parking spaces.
I sent an email about improvements that was right after the first loading zone agreement,
Okay.
prior to the refuse agreement. It was probably 2021 or so. And yes, I sent an email showing the layout and stating that was our intention. And I'm pretty positive we got a response back. No concerns, no problem. And it was the similar process we followed for the railing, for the loading dock repairs, and maybe a few other random things that we did.
Again, you still didn't actually say it. The question is, did you send an email? Whatever else was written on there, was it also lining for car parking spaces?
Yes,
In-
the striping you see in real life is the striping that was shown on the paper.
All right, so you need to just find us that email so we can start looking at it.
Okay.
And see what was and who said yes and who may have said no. And then we have to make a decision because as you can tell, we usually do not have an appetite to add spaces in the back of those stores. We got ourselves out of a deep problem that was occurring in the back of the stores that has been remedied by everyone, and it works out well. And that does not include parking for either tenants or the stores for cars. Loading, unloading, carting, that we all agree on. So let's take a look at what was submitted. So somebody needs to find an email from a future timeline. I don't want to put a due date on this because frankly, I don't know how long it takes to find an email. I'm sure within 2 weeks to 30 days, people can find an email or not find an email. Is that about right? Okay, so 30 days. We'll be looking at it.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, moving right along. Off. I was supposed to turn it on. Sorry. Our length of service program for our fire department, as you know, the board approved this, but there is a little bit more to be done. Maddie is going to take us through the recommended point system that would make people eligible to collect their LoSAP benefit, as well as the logistics for making sure that everything gets on the ballot for the referendum in time. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Assistant Village Manager Zahaj.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening. I know that we are joined by Mike Aurora, who's part of the OFD LoSAP committee. He has been holding my hand throughout this whole process. So I think we're getting to the light at the end of the tunnel here. As Karen mentioned, there are two items before the board tonight for discussion. One is pretty canned, and that is the board resolution. So just to refresh folks who may not recall, the Board of Trustees in the Village of Ossining, as sponsor of the potential LoSAP program, has to call for the question to be put on the November ballot. So we've also been working with the clerk's office with Westchester County to make sure we understand what that process has to look like, deadlines and things of that nature. But before that happens, this board needs to pass a resolution in order to confirm that this is the plan going forward. And so it's in, Jamie, no rush, but if you could pull it up when you have a moment. There are several items in the agenda tonight, attachments, just to make sure that there's no question about what we're discussing. The board resolution is something that is authored by Penflex, who is the vendor who is consulting on this for us as part of the annual service agreement that we will pay if and when we go forward with the program. Basically, the board's conversation a couple weeks back, talking about the various levels of funding, they needed to wait to have that information before they could craft this resolution. So now we have the resolution that speaks exactly to what the board wishes. The first couple paragraphs are relatively standard, but you'll start to see as you get into section 4 that this is a little bit more tailored towards the Village of Ossining in terms of what the entitlement age of 65 is, the $20 per month, and things of that nature. Also on page 2, it talks about the beneficiary, the 10-year beneficiary program that we had also discussed, and how that will work. And then sort of marrying these two items together, and then I'll stop in case there are any questions. On page 3, section 7 talks about the service credit points. So Jamie, if you can zoom in on that, I know it's like super tiny. I couldn't find an actual good copy of this form, so forgive my weird copy paste job. This is a sample basic New York State LoSAP point system that was provided to us in early days. Basically, again, as a refresher, LoSAP is binary every year. So you either make it or you don't. You got to hit 50 points. If you get 49, too bad, so sad. So New York State has sort of I believe it's a New York State document, has provided this template of what it could look like. So there's 10 categories altogether. The first 9 categories are discretionary. So training courses, drills, sleep in or standby, officers, fire department meetings, department responses, teaching fire prevention classes, miscellaneous, and line of duty disability are all categories where the village and the fire department could collectively say, we want to do this or we do not want to do this. And then within those categories, there are certain areas where the points are fixed and some that are flexible. So what we really have been looking at, and again, with the help of Mr. Aurora and the rest of the committee, are the places where we do have discretion, which is training courses, drills, sleep in standby, officers, meetings, teaching fire prevention classes, and miscellaneous. You'll see line of duty disability is 60 points for the year, no matter what. That's if we decide to offer that as category, then the 60 points is non-negotiable. Similar with department responses, this is based on their call volume every year, that we're able to ascertain whether they hit the 25 points or not, but they can hit 25 in that category just merely by attending 7.5% of the annual calls for service. And then finally, at the bottom, if someone is on military leave, this is something that's mandatory under the program. It's mandatory that we offer it, and it's mandatory that we offer it at 50 points. So again, there are a couple different documents in the agenda. I went over this with Mr. Aurora. There are very, very, very few differences between the two documents posted. But just for full transparency, I wanted to make sure that they were both up there. So one is a revision from 4/21 and the other is a revision from 6/1. I don't want to speak for Mr. Aurora, but I know that they did some tinkering around the edges based on some of the board's feedback initially on what these point system might look like. The difference between these two documents is relatively minor. There are a few innocuous, typeface changes and categories and things like that. But the difference between the initial presentation in 2023 and this final point system document dated 6/1 is primarily the chiefs. So I know that the board will recall, we talked about the chief stipend and how that might play into if we have to lower the stipend because now we have LoSAP, how that might affect the points. So in consideration of lowering the stipends for each chief to $6,000, the OFD LoSAP committee has recommended that the chiefs get 25 points simply by virtue of being chief for the year. Initially, that was 20. And then everything was sort of a little bit lower than that.
That goes just for the 3 acting chiefs, right?
Correct. And only in the years which they are serving as elected chiefs. So I'm not sure, if the board has any questions for me, for Mike, but we're getting much closer. The next step would be for the board to approve the resolution. The points document has to be affixed to the resolution, but it is not clear if it requires its own resolution. We're going to find that out as soon as we can from PenFlex.
Is there a draft of the resolution yet?
Yeah, it's in the agenda. So there's 4 documents linked in the agenda. The top one that Jamie's showing on the screen right now is the draft. So there were 2 changes that we needed PenFlex to make. One was to add a line for the mayor's signature at the very bottom. Good catch, Stuart. And the other was the date where it needs to go on the referendum, which is November 4th, 2025.
Well, I'm thinking about the actual words that go on the ballot. I mean,
we have those as well. So that's the next step. So we have this.
because it has to
notice-
be simplified to the point where people understand.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So we have this notice from Commissioner Tejan Nelson from the county that speaks about 2025 proposition referendum submission that gives us an outline of what it is that we need to provide by August 4th for the November 4th ballot, including the following: a certified copy of the text of such proposal, proposition or referendum passed. Such certified copy shall set out all new matter in italics and enclose in brackets all matter to be eliminated. A statement form, which is to be submitted in English and Spanish, an abstract of such proposed proposition, concisely stating the purpose and effect. We have to give them 100 copies, translated into Spanish, 100 copies of that. And then in addition, there is a notice that needs to be posted within 30 days of November 4th. And I believe it has to be posted in all of the locations where folks can vote. That also has, a lot of that summary information. So as a reminder, because this is a referendum issue, once the board has passed the resolution, whenever that may be, this is no longer something that the board can champion or discourage. Once it's a referendum item, the board kind of has to back away. But what we can commit to do, and what I know the fire department is committed to do, is ensure that everybody has all of the information at a glance, in the most simplified format possible. And for folks who want to search a little further, we can certainly link to some of these other more complex documents. Is there anything that I'm missing?
No, you got it. I just, you have to be a registered voter, which is important. In other words, you can't just have moved to the village, let's say November 2nd and come in, but you have to be a registered voter. I believe it's 30 days before the vote, but you definitely have to be a registered voter to do that, because it will be, the notice will actually list all of the voting places within the village where people can do that. And again, it's only for village residents who will be doing this vote. But otherwise, Maddie has basically said it. It's the county that has the 90-day rule in terms of getting it to them. So that's why we want to, get this all together, and it will be posted and be out there. But Trustee White, you're correct. We will try our very best to minimize the legalese, but If you've read some of these propositions, there's a lot in there because there's a lot in this proposition in terms of what the voters are being asked to consider in terms of their vote. So.
Can I ask you, Mr. Aurora, is the fire department planning to do any sort of mailing or any sort of explanatory thing for the public so that they know what to expect and they know what they, 'cause- yeah.
Yes, we're waiting for this to go through and then we plan on holding, we're entertaining getting the library, holding open forums, you know, as much information as possible, mailers, everything that we do. So we are anticipating trying to inform the neighborhood and the community as much as
'Cause
possible.
the onus is on the fire department, not us to educate, right?
Correct.
Right, okay.
We want to take the time to actually educate more than just this. You know, there's a lot of people who don't even know we're volunteer. They, you know, they're under the assumption it's a paid department. You know, hey, I drove by to drop off pizza, nobody's there, you know. So we want to really make this a nice information session and focus on the actual fire department, you know, the makeup of it, what it means, maybe get some volunteers and, you know, really explain this. So we're fully prepared to do that.
I have 3 items, small, medium, and large. Okay. Small. Yeah, you want me to go? I'll get to medium. I'll go in order. I'll start with small. So with the points, with respect to things like meetings, for example, you have to in order to get credit, you kind of beep in, or kind of like you do when you go to the gym or something, where you get, yeah, and that way it's electronically registered that you were there. How late can you be and still get credit for the meeting?
So that's a really good point. You know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's going to be perfect right off the bat. You know, there's a lot of trial and error, but we're going to have very strict monitoring. We're aware of people that may just come towards the end and try to thumb in and leave, or thumb in at the end of a meeting for the dinner. There's going to be a lot of policing, a lot of each company is going to have their dedicated people, but you have to be in the meeting. You know, if it also goes towards, you know, there's a lot of familiarity, right? A lot of, you may have that member that if our meeting's at 7:30 that month and forever, they've always been coming at 7:45. It's not out of the normal. That's their normal time getting there, and the meeting's over at 9, they made it. But if you start seeing different patterns and stuff, you know, we've learned from a lot of other departments while doing this on some of the ways people can get around it. And we're well prepared to battle that and make sure that doesn't happen. But yes, everything is biometric, thumbing in, they call it, you know, and that's really it. But we have to police it, you know. And then to the auditing part, there's a time frame, right? So if your meeting starts at 7:30 and you have the biometrics configured for 7:30 to 7:45, you have to thumb in. After that, it's a manual entry, it's called. That's one person at each company that's responsible for that. Then the committee meets monthly, and the first thing we review is how many manual entries did we have and why? If you see the same patterns, hey, Mike Aurora is always getting manually entered, why? You know, and who's the one always approving that? So that there's a lot of policing involved, you know. And you know, while the law states you post at the end of the year, you post everybody's points for 30 days and then that's it. We plan on posting every month because we have a monthly meeting and we read off our calls and people can track it in real time with the app that's coming with the biometrics. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Hey, I'm missing that call from last week, or I'm missing that meeting from last week. They should see it in real time on their phone. And we're just very prepared to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's my small piece. That's the small one. The medium is as you're thinking about public messaging, my pieces of advice, which you can take or leave, are to connect with folks like Jamie Hoffman, who have thought a lot about and trial and errored a lot. What does it take to get a message out to the village? And so she certainly will have some ideas for you. There's a lot of events that are going to be going on throughout the summer, so those would be great places to be. And you have apparatuses, right? You have trucks and all this kind of stuff that, I would say to whatever extent it's practicable and useful to be able to center some of those as ways of gathering attention to do so. So that's less of a question, more of a recommendation. Now, here's the big one. It's only big because it's a macro question, which is, we're looking at these points. Can you talk a little bit about your recommendation about how the Ossining version of the points is similar or different than the standard and why.
Yeah, absolutely. So we pretty much modeled the state standard. You know, the talk about the Chiefs going back up to 25, they were originally at 25. That's the standard across the state. They usually come in at 25 points. We were originally reduced it to 20, and there was talk about the stipend. So we just brought them back up to the standard. Where we heard the board really clear last time, where I heard the board really clear last time, is let's try to weigh it a lot towards firematics and training. So what we did is we took out some sporting activities, which really didn't even make sense. We were trying to focus on like one or two things, like the 9/11 memorial, get a better turnout, you know. The Baker Collier fund that we do every year, that sometimes that dwindles. We deliver the baskets to everybody. So let's make sure we focus on that stuff, the meaningful stuff. So we reduced some of the recreational categories and we raised some of the fire prevention awareness and training. So I want to say that we probably, we're probably about 60% swayed higher in the firematic category than the standard across. And we heard that here, you know, I tried to listen to everything just as you guys listen to me. It was really great. And that's what we came back with. So there was some categories reduced from the social activities and increased in the firematics and training. And some
That's it,
stuff is
yeah.
stuck in standard, the military leave, the line of duty, that stuff you can't tweak at all.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm, okay, I'm sort of not figuring out this
Yes.
service award program. Like points, has that been changed as well, or is that what we've seen before?
What
It
was
just
that?
looks different. I am looking at the draft, Ossining Fire Department Service Award Program Point System, draft 6.1, 2025.
Yes. Which section are we,
Well, I get the fire responses, right? That's fighting fires, right?
that by the state, yeah,
Yeah, okay. Then there are points just for attending meetings, right?
correct.
Okay. So if I never fight a fire for the year, can I make my points?
It's very hard.
Can I make my points?
I want to say probably not. You'd probably come in around 45 to 46 points and you'd be short. And that's with taking some very rigorous training or retrainings. These are the tables. So we kind of came in this backwards when we started. We
Mhm.
went right at the points because we wanted to make sure it made sense before we even looked at the dollars. And we wanted to make sure that someone couldn't sit home and just
Right,
make their points, right? It's focused on firematics. We need volunteers, we need recruitment, we need retention, we need people to come out and fight fires in the middle of the night. And that's kind of what the focus is. And the other stuff is to build camaraderie and to, you know, build the social events and to keep people volunteering when maybe there are no calls and you still want to keep
Mhm.
them fresh. So to your point, if you did some tabletop exercises, you'd probably keep coming in between 43 and 47 points and it's 50 or not.
Mhm.
So it's very hard. And that's holding office, that's holding some ranks. That's even coming in at 45 to 47 points, you have to have some type of rank to come in at that, like a lieutenant or a president or some type of. And make it every single meeting. Maybe a meeting gets canceled due to weather, you know, it's a lot of errors, it's very hard. That was one of the things I did on the committee, is challenge everybody on the committee to come back to me. And do some tabletop exercises and say, and I think we even spoke about, I said, you go do some tabletop exercise. Strictly math. Show me how you could make the 50 points with no firematics. And it's impossible, it's very hard. Not gonna say impossible, I'm not a genius, but yeah, you have to have, but there's even caps, so there's caps in every category, so you can't just go to meetings and go to parades and go to social events.
Right, that's what I'm trying, I mean, the point here, the whole selling proposition was acquisition and retention.
Yes,
Well, I appreciate all the social aspects of lots of different things. That's actually not the purpose of a volunteer fire department. That may be a glue, but that's not the purpose. You know, all the other stuff without fighting fires, we actually don't need the fire, right? So there's a primary and secondary. So I just don't get the points, and I know that you guys spend a lot of time, so I know it's not simple. But like if I go to 12 funerals in the state of New York, it doesn't say Ossining in the points. Do
Right.
I get a point for every funeral?
no, it's a funeral that is the Ossining Fire Department is going to, so either our member or we've been invited to. And it's,
But you guys get invited all over New York State to funerals.
yeah, but not really, it's not. maybe the chiefs do, which is, but I mean, the funerals that we would go to, like, we just went to one for Millwood because they're a very close mutual aid. That didn't even fall under funeral, that fell under standby because we had to stand by in their quarters so they could go to their funeral. So.
Thank you for my next question. What is, tell me again what a standby is?
So there's two different standbys, which gets confusing in there.
Yeah, that's, I got confused.
There's the snow standby, which we get activated and we go sleep at the firehouse.
Right.
And every 4 hours is considered a point because you're there for 4 hours and it's to keep people there.
Right,
That's a standby.
okay,
Then there's a standby where you're mutual aid, where you're called to go to another department to cover them with your apparatus and your men while they handle whatever social function or line of duty death or some type of function that puts them out of service. Or you're standing by in their quarters because they've been pulled to another department while they have a working fire. So there's a lot of variables. So there's two different standbys. There's a snow standby, and then there's the standby in quarters for a fire mat.
and is there like a boundary or a limit to how many people go to standby, like?
Yeah,
they-
you're only gonna send what the apparatus could hold. So 4 or 5 people, you'll
Got
have a
it.
driver, you'll have an officer.
Okay,
usually-
got it,
Yeah.
got it, that's great. There seems to be, I mean, it's not people who have fallen in active duty as a fire person, it's just people pass away, and it seems like there's a lot of that. It's part, I guess, of the glue of the camaraderie piece.
Yeah, and the social camaraderie part is, especially here in Ossining, outside of the, how it looks like a social function is, we have 9 companies. We have 7 different
Mhm.
firehouses. And we're broken into divisions and sections. So the idea is that you're gonna meet your fellow firefighter at these functions, so your first time meeting them isn't at the door that you're going into a fire, and now you're trying to buddy with someone, so it really helps with the trainings and the social stuff to know who's in Hollow Hose and who's in, the north side that you may never see until you're at a fire, so it's kind of like trying to build that all together.
Okay, and then you give it, so the chiefs get 25 points.
Correct.
Which we discussed. The department, so department officers have greater duty than everybody else? Like
Yes.
they actually do more,
Yes,
so.
yeah, she has a
Okay,
full job
That's
description.
very nice, okay,
Yes.
that's good, if anybody asks for that. And do any of these people get paid?
No, I wouldn't get paid.
I thought there were people that were getting paid in the firehouses.
Dispatchers we removed out of there.
Oh, that's why you did that. Got it.
Dispatches, the only thing that's on the cusp here, which came up in discussion, and since we're talking about everything, is if you have a fire
Mhm.
at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and we're
Mhm.
short for manpower and the village authorizes the village employees to go, they're
Mhm.
not eligible for a point for that.
Because they're getting paid.
Correct. So
That's in here, actually.
right, so there's a lot of, we really dug into everything in there. But yes, to my knowledge, unless, no one gets paid, there was the dispatchers, which we removed from there. And not sure of the fate of the dispatchers with, right now, what's going on, with like what their hours are and stuff like that, if it's 4 hours, because there's a lot of time in there, so. If they're there for 4 hours activated on a standby, that's different, they're probably not getting paid, they were called up for the volunteer, so stuff like that.
Okay. And the fundraising that is done is fundraising for what exactly? It's for the 501Cs that you all created.
So yeah, the fundraisers would be for your, I think there's like 1 or 2 big ones a year that we fundraise.
That has nothing to do with the municipality though, right? Those are separate 501Cs, not under the portfolio of the municipality.
Correct, that's for the fire, I believe the fire department, I wouldn't be able to speak to that, I don't even get involved with that committee.
Okay, let me just see how many points they get for fundraising.
I think it's a committee point,
Right,
I think that falls under.
and there's a
committee.
couple of years, so that's like 2 points, I guess. It feels like when you read the points, but if you guys did the math and you're comfortable that like at some point you have to fight a fire, you have to actually be involved, in paramedics to get points. Or you shouldn't be able to make points, correct?
Yes,
That's actually a big point.
yes, and
Okay.
we added to the fire prevention, which was very minor in there, so we added to the fire prevention, which is the awareness, going to the schools, going to raise awareness in the community and stuff, we made sure that there were points in there for that. That outweigh the social points, and stuff like that.
Okay, and how do these points get changed 2 years from now, 3 years from now? If like we learn, oh, we maybe messed up here, we should give it more points to this kind of person, like. how
Good
does that work?
question. So everything you change about the program, in terms of, entitlement age, in terms of years of service, in terms of, dollars per member per month, that would all have to go to a referendum if you wanted to make those changes. However, the points do not need to go to a referendum. The fire department can't just say, we don't like the points that the board gave us, we're changing the points. There needs to be a formal action by this board to amend whatever is adopted
So
here.
even the points, like you want to change 1 point to 3 points, that's a referendum.
Create a position, remove a position, anything.
No, the
No.
referendum is a local,
Right.
the referendum is everything else. The points are a local board action only.
Yeah, the way it was
Local board,
explained,
got it.
anything revenue impacting or changing has to go to another referendum. Points is here.
Can you reduce the points?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean,
Or take
folks,
them away?
folks still have to hit 50 a year, right?
No, I got that.
Yeah, but if, for
the
example, you
uniform-
said, the authorized non-emergency standby, we feel like people are leaning on that too heavy. We don't want it to be 20 anymore. We want there to be only a maximum of 10 on the standby, and we want to, play with the points in a different category. That's a change that this board could make by resolution, and then we have a new point schedule, and then that's the end of the
It's like
conversation.
fees. We can.
Sure,
a
it's like the
good-
fee schedule,
okay.
sure.
I asked that not because, oh, what's the importance of that? You guys put this together, best guess, right? It's a guesstimate. We're gonna learn in a year that, the training, fundraising shouldn't have gotten it. But this other piece, absolutely, or we even left something off that maybe we need to add. So it's really, I'm looking at adjustments and corrections rather than we don't believe this should be important or that should be important. Look, you got gas filling on here. So don't they fill gas like every Sunday?
Yeah.
So aren't there 52 Sundays in a year?
Right, but so for fuel up, it's for the driver. The driver of the rig has to do a rig check and everything, so the driver, but it's capped under all of your miscellaneous category, so that.
So the whole
You go
category
to
is capped.
15 Sundays, you're done for the year.
I believe it was.
Okay.
No, I think it's
Yeah.
15.
All right. Look, I know that this was
15,
probably a lot of thought. I'm not even
Yeah.
questioning. I just need to understand it.
So you hit one on the head
Because
though, we
my-
didn't even put anything in for the driver to have that responsibility and to go there to make sure that the rigs are fueled up and check
Right.
all the equipment, so yes.
The
but-
first email I'm getting is how can you give blah, blah, blah points to whatever, right? That's the first email, not the big picture. That's gonna be the first email. I looked at this, explain to me the point on whatever. So I'm just trying, I have to understand it because I have to answer questions, I think. That's the other piece. I'm assuming no one on staff is getting points for now managing one more department. Okay. There's a.
Yes, yeah.
I just
Uh,
want to clarify on the dispatchers, that the dispatchers aren't getting a point for being a dispatcher, but when they're dispatching, they're part of the call. Because they're getting the call credit. Do you get it? Because they're there coordinating the call, so that goes towards their call count.
Is that something they're getting paid for through village payroll today?
So I don't know what they're like. I
So
said,
we're
I don't know
gonna
what the
have to
cap-
hash that
You have
out.
to look at that's what I meant by, I
Yeah,
don't know what the.
I didn't
the
understand.
salary
Okay.
caps are, because like the stipends,
Mhm.
it depends on what I don't know their pay, or I don't have anything to do with.
We'll
that.
work it out. That's reasonable.
So you should just look at that.
Yeah, so when you're sitting on the
You can't
desk,
double
not
dip.
doing
You're not getting a
anything.
point as being a
Right.
dispatcher, but the call volume, technically you're seeing operations, so you're at the call. You're
Okay.
coordinating the call, you're working with 60,
Okay, you might want to look at that. I would beg to differ, but it's okay. This is like, we look at it, we deal with it. Let's
Yeah,
not
that's what.
get bogged down
Absolutely.
with one line item. I think
Right.
the principle is if you can't double dip.
Oh, no, absolutely.
So, and starting into semantics, while I'm sitting there, but really looking, so I'm really on the call, let's like stay very up here and not down here because it starts getting too murky for
Yeah,
the average Joe to understand.
I just want everybody to know we are well prepared to strongly enforce and monitor this. It's been a long time coming for us, and we've been gearing up and planning along with the technology and stuff, like this is something very serious, so.
So,
Yeah.
So just one question
No.
you brought up that you caused me to wonder about, all like the background data that you all go into and over the course of the year, you've got all the check-ins, you got all the this and all that kind of stuff. Does the village retain the right to access that and look at it?
Yes, you guys, the same technology and systems that we have, you'll have administrative rights users, whoever you want to deem to be in charge of it. It's full transparency. You
Okay.
can run reports.
That's
I
fine.
think we own We actually own, they were the
You're the
of the
sponsor.
village.
Correct.
I just,
My issue. is
sometimes
The other side.
there's not access.
Yeah,
Sometimes
you
there's
have
not
less control
access.
over any changes than the bill than you do because you're the sponsor of it.
Okay, no, that's fine. It's like,
We own it actually, and the other, mine is the other problem, which is that we now have to have staff, because everything's great, but every single rollout of technology in this village has not gone the way the vendors have said they've gone. It's not a complaint about the village staff, it's not about the department that was, there's virtually none that have gone from the parking to municipal stuff. Every single system, the vendor said X, that isn't exactly what happened. And so, I'm sorry?
Sales team.
Well,
The very
but it's the
balance.
truth. I mean, it's silly to sit here and act like it's all gonna go smoothly. The issue is that the people that are gonna have to clean up is actually not the fire department. And the nervousness is that this is, while not straight pay, it involves a pension-like system.
Yes.
And as I said, like, once it comes to real money, you can't even make a mistake by a dollar, right? Because people get very nervous about that. So I'm more concerned about staff time and the cost of that than I am about some of this other stuff. You are gonna have to figure out with meetings. I think you'll spend a year. And then you'll say, yeah, Joe Schmo is always coming in, 45 minutes into a 1 hour meeting. We're gonna put a new rule. If you're not in the first 15 minutes and stay.
Yeah.
If you're on Zoom, you have to be seen. You can't, I mean, like, you're gonna have to, we do this all the time. You're gonna make adjustments. The village will have to make adjustments because we're actually gonna own the data and say, yeah, this isn't working for us. This is not, somebody is trying to play games. That's not the design of this. And it's not fair to the others. But to me, that's such a tertiary discussion. Like, we've had the primary, we gotta get this passed. I'm also curious as to the marketing of this and the branding. Who is paying for all of that? I mean, I understand you standing at the library, if the library lets you do that, and educating the public about, their local fire department, is the board supportive of this? Yes, the board has seen all this. But if you're gonna do mailers and all that, who's paying for all that? That ain't cheap anymore.
Yeah, I think, and if you have a different understanding, or if Stuart or Karen, please let me know. I think similar to what I mentioned earlier, that the board will kind of have to back away. It's not just the board, it's really the village. So any resources that are put into mailers or refreshments for those kind of meetings is going to have to be fire department money as opposed to village contractual to fire department
Yeah.
money. Yeah.
We're aware.
What is defined as fire department money? We pay for most of everything. What is that?
So the village, I was just looking to see if Dale turned on her camera. The
She's there. She's
yeah. The there's an operating budget set by, there she is. Thanks, Dale. Set by the village board each year, that allocates from the operating fund, which is raised by taxes, among village taxpayers, a certain amount of money that's earmarked for fire department operations. That money is not able to be used to publicize, getting folks on board for this program. However, when the fire department does fundraisers for different companies and things of that nature, that's money that stays with the fire department, that's unrelated to the village. That's the money they would have to tap in order to promote
And
this.
who tracks that money?
We have a board of commissioners.
And they file somewhere what they're spending and how they're spending it?
You're asking things that's outside of my scope. I've never been involved in that, but yes, there's very strict meetings. They meet every month. There's commissioners. You probably know some of them that are on there. And there's accurate records and very strict monitoring of everything. And I think we've already planned on to save, obviously, is to your point with the fundraising, is when our fundraising letter goes out, use that to piggyback on
Good idea.
LoSAP, save some money on the mailers and stuff. So
Right, so it's a 501c, these organizations, right? They file 990s?
yes,
Okay.
audits every
Okay.
year, twice a year, I think.
Yeah, I've never seen any and I've tried to find it and I haven't been able to, but that might just be me. So this has to be really well monitored because a year or two from now, I don't want to be in a news item about how accidentally the wrong fund was being used.
Neither does Mike Aurora. I don't want to be on any news channel. We want this to go. the
Okay,
way it's
so
supposed
can you
to
make
go.
it clear to everybody about this, please?
Yes.
Oh, it's after 9 o'clock, okay. We have a very long executive session tonight, so I'm trying. Okay, what do you need from us today about this, LoSAP? Oh, Mike, one more question. Is, when you guys looked at everything, was Sleepy Hollow on that list? Do they have LoSAP? Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
So the next action by this board is potentially going to be next Wednesday, where
Okay.
the resolution that's linked in the agenda
Okay.
will be part of the legislative meeting. And as I mentioned earlier, you may or may not need a separate standalone resolution to adopt the point schedule that was just discussed. That may just be an attachment to the resolution, or it may need to be its own thing.
Like a writer, like a.
Right, exactly.
addendum. Anybody have any other questions? I mean, I'm sort of excited that I'm seeing something come to fruition here. But, you know, obviously this is an expense to. Question? No? Oh, you're just gabbing? Okay. Obviously, like, you know, we want to make sure that, so I'm hearing that the village should not be promoting this, that it has to be done only by the fire department? Is that the
You
deal?
can, the village can, and the board can, and Stuart, again, please tell me if I'm getting this wrong, can say, flip over your ballot, there's something on the back. But
we-
the village can't say, vote yes or vote no.
And
You
we
put it
can't
on the,
say
back.
we support this or anything like that?
You cannot.
That's news to me. Okay.
Is that accurate? Yeah.
We can't influence the vote.
But we're sponsoring it.
I
You're,
think
you're
it's,
putting it forth as an
you're
idea
putting
for the
it forth
community to
as a
decide.
community.
Forward as something that the community can vote on, and you have to be a registered voter in the town.
Village.
Village,
Only village.
only
so
village,
No town.
correct.
But this will, but if they answer a fire call in the town, that goes toward the point system.
Yes,
Correct.
it's the village fire.
But it's the
But the
village
town won't be
fire
voting on it,
department
no.
and we serve the town
Okay.
through an intermunicipal agreement, so.
Because it's an IMA, it's. a
So
contract with the
wherever,
village.
wherever the village fire department operates, should that ever change in the future, where they, you know,
Okay, so you guys are gonna set up some people, so if somebody calls one of us and says, I don't understand, we shouldn't really be answering it, somebody else should be, right? Because since we shouldn't be promoting, okay, that's fine. So we're hitting the timeline correctly. This will be the time, or by next week, if you have any questions, because once we say yes, it's like moving. Is there a simple majority on this referendum? 50% plus one person?
Yes,
There's a yes on it?
that's it.
All right.
hey. Thank you, Mr. Aurora, and thank you, Assistant Village Manager. Next up,
Thanks. We have a long exec session. We're after 9 o'clock. This piece, can this be discussed under new business, the civic social? I know, I'm sorry, are you saying it'll be fast?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm one of the
I have
portals
one
of this. I
question.
just like sort of said.
so, yeah, I think this is, I mean, I think we can knock it out pretty quickly. Maddie attended NYSEMA conference, Municipal Leaders Conference, and met a gentleman named Sam Tolles who runs a business called Civi Social, and it really is a very interesting niche marketing type of opportunity. And we had Maddie and Jamie had met with him, and the mayor, Jamie, Maddie, and I had met with him. The presentation was embedded in the agenda, so hopefully you got to take a look at it. But this really gives an opportunity for us to leverage social media more fully than we have been. Jamie does an excellent job at communications, given our very limited capacity to do communications. And some of the things we struggle with are, you know, content creation, but also having the strategic framework you need for really effective communications. A lot of what Civi Social does is really enable you to be better storytellers, which is increasingly more important, to leverage platforms like TikTok, which we don't do at all, which is where the majority of people are if you want to reach them. And also do it in a way that humanizes our staff, our functions, our ability to outreach and educate. And just one really quick thing that I want to say, because this is what sold me. As you know, we have enormously difficult time recruiting, and this is a statewide national issue, code enforcement officers. The other thing is, no one is ever happy to see a code enforcement officer, which makes it probably one of the most difficult jobs in the village. So not only is it difficult to find people to want to do it, it's a hard job because you're not often being welcomed with open arms when you're going to somebody's place, resident or business. That said, they worked in this guy, Sam, worked in a community and they did this whole thing and they focused on code enforcement. And one of the code enforcement officers was going to a movie and the ticket taker said, I know you, you're from XYZ municipality. And all of a sudden the guy got nervous because he figured he was going to get yelled at and something went wrong. And he said, I want to be a code enforcement officer. How do I do it? I saw you on social media. I can't wait. I'm so excited. How do I sign up? So that is a really good, like if we get one person to sign up to be a code enforcement, I will consider this a major home run. So I can turn over to Maddie to give you some of the details and the cost, which we felt was quite reasonable and a good and well within our marketing budget that we probably wouldn't have spent anyway. So.
Thanks, Karen. So as Karen mentioned, the proposal, as well as the slide deck that Sam shared with us is embedded in the agenda. Sam comes with quite a bit of experience. He worked with, for all the kids listening, Mr. Beast, who's a big time influencer, also ran Bleacher Report's marketing. So a couple big names in his resume. But I think the thing, besides what Karen mentioned, about really being able to cultivate the messaging that we have within the resources that we already have, which is using our staff to tell our story, which I think is sort of so brilliant in its simplicity that, we haven't, we've missed it basically. But the thing about this particular deployment is this gentleman comes here and spends a week with village staff, and it's sort of like a train the trainer, teach a man to fish sort of situation. It's not sort of an ongoing engagement where we're continuing to make payments. There are certainly, opportunities to work together on specific projects. One thing, as we're just talking about LOSAP, I didn't make the connection. One of the most brilliant successes that he's had was a community that had to pass a rather unpopular tax measure, and being able to, get out there with information about it, again, not promoting it or negating it, being able to get that information out there in a digestible way so folks understood what they were voting for, actually helped them to get a much larger turnout on voting, on that ballot referendum, which was pretty cool. So I think that, for the cost, which is $15,000 plus a $3,000 travel fee, we would basically get this gentleman here for a week. He would mostly be working with Jamie in the manager's office. But then also, I believe part of his process is he gives out a survey to village staff, and then folks can self-identify as people who want to be storytellers on behalf of the village, and then works with different pockets of them, shows them how to use CapCut, different sorts of video platforms, and basically just make sure that we have the toolkit that we need to sort of take our social media engagement and community engagement to the next level. I know that this is something that Jamie is super excited about. There are a lot of, and you might see in the slide deck as well, insights into not only the Ossining community. I think our median age we found out is a little over 41 years old. That's like the Instagram, like golden range, right? So, just sort of insights like that might not otherwise have been available to us, are things that we might be able to glean not only for this engagement, but also in building a relationship going forward, where this gentleman, has the potential to be an ally in, helping us solve problems that we might have as they come up. Jamie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Hi. There's nothing really to add. I would just say that this is a really great opportunity for us to reach people that we haven't reached before. And, I think that the mayor and the village manager and Maddie have attended events lately where they discuss social media and marketing and community engagement. And our village definitely stands out. But I think it's time for us to go to the next level and learn what's out there, what's next, because there are a lot of things that we can do, but we need to be trained on them, and to have someone here that can actually do that, and show us how to learn that, so that staff can help and that we can push out more information. I think that tied in with the YouTube channel would really be something for us to reach a lot of people that we may not be reaching. And we can also, through AI, reach them in a bilingual way as well.
Thank you, Jamie. So does the board have any questions?
My question is, he's far away in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Are there business companies closer to us that do this?
Really a one of a kind opportunity. I don't know of anybody, and I don't believe there is anybody doing this specifically in this format. For small and medium size municipalities, most of the work that's done is like contracted out. You hire somebody, they manage your content. It's an ongoing retainer. This is really a one-off, which we really like a lot. Sometimes managing somebody who's managing your content takes just as much work as doing it yourself. And this basically allows you to learn what to do, how to do it, which we're pretty good at. And the police department's doing a good job of this too. I mean, they've gone viral several times. So I want to give out shout out to them too, but this is learning that they can enhance their prowess in social media
Well, they
as
have
well.
dogs and puppies to.
I know, we don't have
Right.
dogs and puppies. We have code enforcement officers, but still, we can do a lot of, different things. So we didn't see anything at this price point that even came close to providing the benefits that this does.
Do trustees get to go to the training?
You can, sure. And, the training is really like sort of a one-on-one with probably like Jamie for 5 days, but then
Mhm.
meeting with all the various stakeholders, and absolutely trustees would be involved in the storytelling as well.
It sounds good.
My only other question would really be like, be interested in hearing or get assurances from him that has experience working with like diverse communities such as ours, right? In terms of how to different communities listen differently and
Right.
listen for different things.
So interesting, if I may, since my name is also on it, so let me tell you like a couple of things. He was actually contacting us, right? We were on Zoom from New Mexico. Is that where was he? He was on the border
It was, yes, New Mexico.
where the population there is Hispanic, higher than ours as a part of the population. And he was actually working on that with that community, exactly that. So, there's actually a tool for $10 a month that you can have that actually creates a better communication in Spanish than this sort of you write in English and AI translates, although AI is very good, but it actually uses that. So he is working, actually did a lot of work in California, but he also is actually right now working with those communities and gaining information. So it is a little bit different. To answer the question of local, in the past 5 years, we went local twice. I don't want to name names of vendors because they're local. It did not work out and it cost more than the price tag here. And that was a few years ago. A very like well-known company locally and a person, because sometimes people are better than like having company. There are pros and cons, both of which did not work well. Basically, they're as good as the person that's doing it for you, and they don't necessarily understand municipal stuff. So here is a person who actually is doing train the trainer in essence. She's teaching you how to learn how to do. I guess you could go on YouTube and learn how to be better at social media, but that also becomes a full-time gig. And if I understood it correctly, yes, it is Jamie, but I do believe he was open to other people attending. It's just the problem he's had is when he says, I'd like to have a department attend, everybody looks and goes, so I can't close up the village or the city for 5 days to do this training. And that's not realistic, right? So it's the other problem. If you told him like the whole police department will come for 5 days and learn social media, he'd say, okie dokie. But he actually believes the selling proposition is the opposite. I could train 1 or 2 people and they can go and do the work that needs to be done. I think for the price, it's probably fair. It's not a lot. Does anybody guarantee anything? No, but we do have a sense because we've been shopping for people. That's why I think Maddie was on the lookout. We haven't been able to find people because again, the model is usual. Hire me. I keep finding ways to stay employed. The graphic artists do the same thing. Hire me, and then they keep going and going and going, and make a living. I'm sorry. That's what you do. Frankly, I do consulting. That's what I do.
find that conversation I had today and why somebody should hire me for yet another year. And so this is different because this is more like my success comes from teaching someone to do it. I do think having just one person learn it is probably not the smartest way to go. You always want at least two people. No offense, Jamie, but you want a couple of people. And I'm hoping that Jamie then does go to other departments. I like the whole cultural difference because that is actually what he believes his strength is. Now, we have to buy into it or say, no, I don't. It's like any interview. You either believe the person or you don't believe the person. We should probably call a couple of municipalities, Karen, just to say what was, you did get references already, way ahead of the game. So the local issue, the cost is totally reasonable. I think he would love to have a community, like, we're like right in his sweet spot, our size. Yeah, it would be nice if he was more local, but we have a really hard time when we hire people local, when we don't like the work they do. It's very problematic. So sometimes a little distance ain't bad. Does anybody, how are people leaning? I mean, I think we've discussed this enough. How are people leaning on this? If I can get a temperature read?
I will go. So I am generally in favor of this. And what I'm doing now is I'm looking. So the only hesitation I have, which is a goofy hesitation, is that my man has 11 followers on Instagram and four, now five subscribers on YouTube. Unbelievably low numbers. To me, it just demonstrate there's no effort put into those. But then the LinkedIn has like 600 and something followers. If you're a social media person, you would think that your social media would be that. Now the resume is it speaks for itself. But that's my only like, what's that about? So if he wants to hire me to help him with his social media, I'd be happy to help him build up his social media, but we can talk about that offline. For our purposes, I think that it's totally fine.
That's a great question, actually. If I were a web developer and I looked at your website and said,
This sucks.
it's pretty bad, why would I hire you? I do think some of the data, so he's very data driven, and that's how he's made his living, to show you success in what he's doing. And also to talk, I mean, he really believes you have to, not that he likes TikTok, but you need to be on TikTok. That's like his big thing. And how CNN and all the television combined doesn't even make it to the first rung of the ladder of where TikTok is. And he said, I'm not talking about whether I like the company or not, or whether I like who owns it. That's really where it's all out. I think TikTok and YouTube were the pieces, but we could also ask him, like, if you were us, like, how could we be talking about this? We had deputy mayor saying, like, I don't understand. He may have an answer for it, right? Or he may not, and I think it's a very good question. What else? I mean, we don't need to sign a contract this minute. We just need to.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
I would like to participate in some of the training. I think that the core idea, it makes a ton of sense to me. I
Right.
think that there's so much that
Yeah.
so many stories that we could be telling of what we're doing here in the village that go untold, and to be able to increase our capacity to tell those
Right.
stories, I think makes all the sense in the world. I just wanted
Right.
to raise that little goofy flag.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. Look, the dog thing with the police department was actually brought up because it's a sign that what you normally think a police department should be talking about isn't actually what they should be doing. What they're doing is actually the right thing. You're humanizing a department that a lot of people don't really understand what it does. But when you humanize and say we're in the community, that is a big part of what they do. So then when they have some serious drug bust or a protest that goes out of hand, you then see them differently, because until then you saw that they're real people handling like everyday community stuff. He actually likes that. That's a great example of the great use of social media. And like, me running around saying I was here, I was there, or in the mayor message this week, that Dana White was here and the deputy mayor is great. some people write to me and say, you know, you people keep patting yourself on the back for doing the job that you're hired to do. Okay, we can get into a big discussion. That's not actually what we're hired to do, but that's not the point. It's a perception thing, right? So if we really talked about, you know, why tree seeders are important, but be exciting about it, right? We're not really there. And Jamie has been saying that. So this is not like, you know, she said, like, I'd love to be more creative. I think I'm pretty creative. I think we're pretty, but you know, like, how do you stay in front of the curve rather than behind? How do you differentiate? Do we really need to differentiate from other municipalities? Who the heck knows? But it would be at least nice to know how to do it if we had to, and learn it. And it's not the type of thing you have to learn every year. And it's not an MBA, you know, we're not paying for somebody to go out and get an MBA. We are, you know, for this price. So I'm hearing a thumbs up. Am I hearing a thumbs up? And we'll ask some questions. And if anybody wants to join, I mean, you may have somebody on staff. We should also ask him how many is the maximum. Can he only handle like one-on-one, or could we have 3 people there sometimes for an hour here or an hour there? Is that problematic? I think you do have to ask, because I would like to see some of this. Because in order for Jamie to get information and good storylines, she has to have content that people supply her with. And we have to know the content and how one supplies her with content in real time. So for some of us who are interested, might be another department person. So ask them what for us, what's the ideal and what's the maximum? Is it a problem? Somebody comes for 2 hours and it moves on, you know, that kind of thing. That's a practical question. Your thoughts on a yay or nay on this? It's a thumbs up with a couple of, okay. And we do budget for this, so we're not asking, nobody here is asking for incremental. This has been budgeted for, actually more than this, but now we're able to go forward with it. All right, what do we got?
That concludes our meeting for this evening.
Okay.
Adjourn to executive session for matters of collective bargaining, please.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Don't shut off yet, Jamie. Thank you, everyone. It is 9:39, and we hope to see everybody next week for legislative session, and have a good evening.